Chef Taylor here, and welcome back to Ricochet Cook's Lunch Club. Today we're going to be making a frittata. Frittata is basically a quiche but without the crust. So there's going to be an egg base with a little bit of dairy or dairy alternative. I'm going to be using some milk, but you can use coconut milk, almond milk, you could even use yogurt or sour cream. You just need to make sure you've got a quarter cup of it for every 6 eggs that you're using for the base. And then beyond that, we're gonna put in some onion, some potato, some cheese, and whatever veggies we have in our fridge. So the very first thing we're gonna get started on is our potato. So I've already got my potato nice and peeled up, and this is a Yukon Gold potato, so they're gonna have a nice texture when I cook them in my frittata, and I wanna thinly slice it. So I'm gonna take my potato, I'm gonna take my little claw, and I'm gonna make some nice thin slices with it. I don't want anything too thick, because it's gonna have a hard time cooking when it goes into the oven. So I might even trim these guys down a little bit once I get them all sliced. Once I get towards the end of the potato and it's getting a little bit rocky, I'm gonna flip it over so I've got my nice flat bottom, it's not gonna go anywhere, and I'm gonna keep on slicing. And these little half moons are actually my ideal shape, so I'm gonna trim up the other slices I did so that they're all this shape. All these little bits out of my way. So all of these are gonna go into my little potato bowl over here. Now frittatas are a great way to use up whatever you might have in your fridge. Just because they have eggs doesn't mean that they're a breakfast dish. We can have them for lunch, dinner, breakfast, brunch, anything in between. I think that they're always a great snack. But we wanna make sure that we've got all of our ingredients ready to go. We've got all of our mise en place in place and prepped so that when it comes time to start cooking, we are ready. So I've got all my potatoes nice and thinly sliced up. Okay, I'm gonna take those out of the way. I'm gonna move on to my onions. So I'm gonna use 1 onion for this recipe. If your onions are a little bit smaller, you can use 2. And all I wanna do is thinly slice my onion. So I've got it broken down into halves and I've got the skins off. And I'm gonna turn them towards me and I'm gonna thinly slice. So I'm gonna tuck my fingers in and just thinly slice into little half moon shapes, same as my potato. And as I go, I'm gonna move the pieces of onion out of the way so that I've got nice thin slices. And I'm gonna do the same to the other half. Thinly sliced onion. And this is gonna cook down really nicely in our frittata. Now what makes a frittata different than an omelet is that we're gonna be cooking the ingredients at like the same time as we cook the eggs. So instead of making a filling that goes inside of our omelet, we're gonna cook all of our veggies and then pour our eggs on top. So I'm gonna get my knife out of the way. And all of these onions I'm gonna tuck away into a bowl. Now, as I said, frittatas, you can really customize them. You can make them your own. If you've got some bacon or some sausage and you wanna cook that up, and you can put that in as well. I'm gonna be using what I have in my fridge, and I don't like food waste. So I've actually got some kale stems here. I've got some kale leaves as well that I'm gonna be using, but these stems are great to eat. They have a nice crunchy texture, so I'm gonna dice them up nice and small, and that's gonna be part of my veg going into my frittata. So nice small bite-sized pieces, and these are gonna get, again, a little bit of a cook right before we put our eggs into our frittata. Now the reason I don't usually use my stems in a salad is because they're a little bit tough to eat, but they're perfect if you saute them up in a stir fry or in a frittata, something like that. So they're a great source of iron as well. All those cleaned up. The ingredient I'm not going to deal with right now is my fresh basil, so you can use whatever fresh herbs you might have, or if you've got some dried thyme even, that would be great in this frittata. My basil, I'm lucky enough that I actually have my own little basil plant, so it's nice and fresh, very fragrant, and I'm just going to tear this up and add this to my frittata once I start cooking it. Now that we've got our veggies prepped, we're gonna work on our eggs. So I've got a mixing bowl here, and I've got my eggs right beside me and my milk, and I'm gonna crack 6 eggs into my bowl. Now when I'm cracking my eggs, I wanna make sure I crack them on a flat surface so that the shell has no risk of going inside my bowl. So I'm gonna crack right on my cutting board and then put my eggs into the bowl and then whisk them all together. So you guys can count with me. This is my first egg. I'm gonna get rid of my shells and make sure those go into my compost. And this way, I know that my eggs are gonna be totally shell-free because I can see in my bowl, there's nothing going on there. I'm not risking anything falling in as I crack the egg. We're up to 4 eggs, 5 eggs, and Lucky number 6. All right, so all 6 of my eggs are in my bowl. I'm gonna give my hands a little bit of a wipe because they've got some egg on them. And I'm gonna give this a whisk before I put my milk in. So just break up your yolks with your whisk. And what this does is it helps combine those egg whites and those egg yolks together before I get my milk in. I like to give this a thorough mixing before the milk goes in because it's a little bit harder to break up those yolks once the extra liquid's in there. And for my milk, I'm using regular dairy milk. You can use whatever you might have in your fridge. Yogurt, sour cream, or even coconut yogurt is pretty good in this too. I'm gonna add about a 1/4 cup into my egg mix. And what this does is it helps us have a nice fluffy and airy frittata. So my egg mix is all ready to go. All it's missing is a little bit of seasoning. So I'm gonna put some salt in. Give that a mix. And then we'll move on over and we'll start cooking so we can get our frittata on the go. All right, chefs, now that we've got all of our mise en place ready to go, we can start cooking our frittata. So first thing I'm gonna do is get my burner on. So I'm gonna lift up my pan and get my burner turned on to a nice medium heat. I'm gonna make my frittata in a cast iron pan. These are great because they can go from the stovetop right into the oven. But if you've got any other stainless steel pans or non-stick pans that can go in the oven, you can use those instead. I want my pan to start getting a little bit warm and I'm gonna add a little bit of vegetable oil to it. And we're gonna start cooking our vegetables right in the same pan we're going to cook our frittata in later. So first thing to go in is gonna be our thinly sliced onions. And we wanna sweat these out. So that means that we wanna cook them until they're nice and clear. That's gonna intensify the flavor of our onions and get rid of any extra moisture. The difference between a frittata and an omelet is really just this cooking method. Frittata is an Italian style preparation of eggs. So we're gonna layer in our vegetables, cook them in our pan. The eggs go in at the very last second, right before it goes in the oven. This is what lets our frittata get nice and puffy. So it's gonna do that final bit of cooking in the oven and get nice and light. Now, because I'm using this cast iron pan, it'll take a couple minutes for the pan to start warming up, but then all of a sudden I'm gonna start to hear it. So I can hear these little sizzling bits of onion, so I know that it's starting to get warm, it's starting to heat up. Another thing to be mindful of is that because this pan is all one material, it's all one piece, this handle right here is gonna get warm really quickly. So I'm gonna be careful not to touch this unless I've got an oven mitt or a rag, because I don't want to burn my hands, especially when I go to move this pan from the stovetop into the oven. Now with my onions, I'm going to keep cooking them while I describe everything else we've got ready to go. So we have our thinly sliced potatoes. These we want to make sure we get them started cooking before the eggs go in as well. We have our kale stems for a little bit of crunch, our kale leaves, some cheese, and then our eggs and our milk mixed together. Now that my onions are cooking a bit, I'm going to give them a little seasoning with a little bit of salt. We're going to keep layering in the seasoning as we go and cook our frittata down. Now you're really starting to hear that sizzle. I just want to keep an eye that they're not caramelizing. I don't want any browning of my onions. I just want to cook out that extra water so they're really, really flavorful. Now that they've had a bit of a head start, I'm going to add in my potatoes. So these are nice and thinly sliced so that you're gonna get a good mouthful of potato when you get a bite of our frittata. So every slice, when we slice it up, we'll have a little bit. They do take a little bit longer to cook, so that's why we have them in here early on with our onions. Just gonna give those a few minutes to get cooking and I'll be right back. So my potatoes and onions have been cooking for about 4 minutes at this point. So my onions are nice and soft and my potatoes are starting to get there. So I'm gonna put my kale stems in next. Remember, these are gonna take a little bit longer to cook than the leaves. So the stems go in first. Give that a little stir. And these kale stems, they're super nutritious. They're gonna add a nice little crunch to our frittata as well. But if you've got other vegetables in your fridge that you like to use, peppers are really popular in frittatas. You can put different kinds of onions, other fresh herbs. Like I said, I'm gonna be using some fresh basil from my own basil plant that I have. But if you've got green onions or chives, you can go ahead and put those in your frittata as well. Next vegetable that's gonna go in is, of course, my kale leaves. I like to add leafy greens to my frittatas. Adds a little bit of extra color. If you've got arugula or Swiss chard, those would be great in here as well. And these leaves are gonna wilt down pretty quickly. Because we're adding all of these vegetables to our eggs, it's going to make it feel like a whole meal. It's not gonna feel like something you'd have for breakfast. It's really a sit down, eat it with a knife and fork kind of dish. So it's perfect for a nice filling lunch. And it comes together pretty quickly as well. I'm gonna go ahead and season again with a little bit of salt. And you can see my potatoes are starting to get a little bit brown. Let me tilt my pan so you can see. That's what we want, is a little bit of color on the potatoes so that we know that they're gonna be nice and cooked through once the eggs go in. And those kale leaves are gonna wilt down as well. Once my veggies are at a good point, they're all starting to soften, I'm gonna spread everything out into a layer. And this is just gonna make sure that every bite of the frittata is gonna have a bit of all the vegetables. I don't wanna get a piece that has all the potato and then one piece over here has none. I want it all spread out in a nice thin layer. And right here we're gonna pause because we wanna make sure that our oven is perfectly preheated before we put the eggs in. It's very important that the eggs go in your pan with the cheese and any fresh herbs you have, and then it goes right to the oven so that we get that nice fluffy frittata and it puffs up. So I'm gonna go ahead and double check that, and I'll be right back once I know that my oven is good to go. All right, chefs, so my oven is all good to go. I've preheated it to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. If you're doing this at home, make sure you've got an adult that knows that you're using the burner. They're nearby and they're gonna help you get this from the burner into your oven. So at this point, my veggies are looking nice and cooked. My potatoes are almost fully cooked. They're nice and tender and they've got a little bit of color on them, which is what I like. I'm gonna add my egg and milk mixture right on top of my veggies in the pan. And you can hear that sizzle because my pan is nice and warm. So what that's doing is it's already getting the bottom part of my frittata cooking. It's bubbling a little bit around the edges. To this, I'm going to add my cheese. I put my cheese in after my egg because I want to see that the cheese is going all around the frittata. Same with the veggies. I want a little bit of cheese in every bite. So all my cheese goes in. If you've got another kind of cheese at home, you can use that too. Sometimes I put goat cheese in my frittatas, which is really delicious. And then last but not least, I've got my fresh basil. So this is just basil I picked from my plant, and I'm just gonna tear it by hand and lay a little bit of basil in for some tops of flavor. And my frittata is ready to go to the oven. So once again, make sure that you're turning off your burner. You've got oven mitts or a rag or an adult to help you. We're gonna move this hot pan right into the oven so that it can finish cooking. All right, chefs, after 20 minutes of baking in the oven, this is what our frittata is looking like now. So you can see the eggs have puffed up a little bit and we've got lots of that extra gooey and delicious looking cheese on the top. Right from here, you can serve it from the pan or you can flip it out onto a plate if you like, and it's ready to go for lunch. I hope you had fun cooking with me today, and I'll see you again tomorrow for the next installment of the Rooks to Cooks Lunch Club.